And hello, we are back with another video recording of Cherie and Elizabeth Talk Sports. I am Elizabeth from Hear Her Sports, and I am again here with Cherie Turner from Strides Forward. Cherie, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing really well. It's a very busy week because we're coming into the Boston Marathon is
Oh,
a
yeah.
week from today. And what that means, if you live in Boston, is that there is a whole slew of events all week long because it's marathon week really, and they've started building the finish line, or like the finish line is always painted on the road, but they start building all of the stands and all the trucks are out. It's just, it's in the air and it's
That's so
very, very
fun.
exciting. Yeah. So it's going to be a busy week and it's just going to be a ton of fun. And there are lots of exciting events going on. But that is not my update for the week.
But before
My,
you go on your update,
oh, yes. Sorry.
I've been meaning to ask, are you ready? Because you're going to be running.
I am ready.
Good.
And I'm ready and I'm curious because I've been doing this track racing up until a month before the Boston Marathon. Like literally the last race I did on the track, which was half a mile, was on March 18th, and the Boston Marathon is on April 18th. And so I've, done some long runs and I have, recovered from all the track stuff, and I'm just gonna see how it goes. My number one goal is to just have fun
Cool.
and really, really, really enjoy myself, and not get hurt and all that stuff, and do my best. But I'm going in. I would definitely say underprepared, but we're gonna see how it goes because I just raced Boston in October, and I've still been, having really hard workouts, and so I'll just be curious to see how it all comes together.
Not to put
So
any pressure, but I'm curious to see how all that speed workout plays out.
I am too, and that's what I'm really curious about, is if I've held on to enough of the endurance from the end of last year, and now I've done all this speed work and a lot of strength work as well. I've been in the gym a lot over the last many months. And so maybe it all comes together and I have I feel great. We'll see. And the weather is working in my favor because it's going to be a very cool day from everything that we're seeing so far, which is great for me because I don't do well in the heat. So, yeah.
Well, I will say, and I don't know when this video will actually post, but the Hear Her Sports episode that we'll be posting on Thursday is with Stacy Sims, and she talks a lot about all of the training that you're doing and saying that, short speed stuff, strength workout is far more important than endurance. Basically, women that are older and women are so good at endurance naturally, they basically don't need to do it. So I am excited for
Interesting.
you. And if you need a little bit of confidence, maybe listen to that before you head out.
I will definitely. We've talked about this episode
Yes.
off air many, many times, and we're both extremely excited about it coming out. So,
Yeah.
so I'm excited about that. And I actually, my update feeds perfectly into what you just said, because what I wanted to briefly bring up is I've been thinking a lot about masters racing. I mean, it's kind of always on my mind because I am a masters racer and I'm a member of this, sort of newly rejuvenated masters team with the Tracksmith Hares. And one of the things that got me thinking about, because I've done some interviews with some championship masters racers recently, I wrote a story for the Tracksmith Journal that's going to show up online pretty soon here. So I had reason to interview a bunch of people. And I talked to Diane Oliveira, who she won the 400 race that I was in. She got second in the 800, and then she was part of a 4x400 world record setting relay team at nationals. And so I was very excited to talk to her. But one of the things that I talked to her about quite a bit was the fact that she had had a really bad injury. And she was out for, like the better part of a year. It was a long comeback. And she went to, I want to say she went to about 6 doctors. And it was sort of this like, you should slow down. You should not, oh, your racing days are over. Oh, you can't run, one after the other. And she finally gets to this woman doctor who had a more holistic approach and referred her to somebody who is outside of kind of the Western medicine system, and this person helped her out and now she's back and doing all the great things she just did. But what it got me thinking about is the important role that masters athletes, people who are pushing their bodies, play in our medical system, and especially women. When you're talking about Dr. Stacy Sims, that we're providing really great information for people, information and examples for people to realize what the potential of bodies are as we age. And we're pushing the medical system to stop looking at us like we're a bunch of outliers, which we still very much are. But hopefully that's going to change a bit, and we have better expectations for ourselves as we age. That's sort of my fingers crossed hope about another side effect of this Masters competitive athleticism that we're seeing more and more, because it is growing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so
that's
that's
so true.
yeah,
It's so
yeah,
true. Like it's so interesting, and I can't remember which episode this was. It probably was with Sam Moore, but she talks about that. Is that we're the first generation of women who actually were like pretty much took part in sports.
yeah,
Like you and I are the first post Title IX, and I even consider myself pre Title IX. And
yeah.
so we're it. We're the information pool.
Well, right. And I mean, it's a strange thing to think about, that like we're the first ones
It's
to be
2022.
studied. And yeah, it's like, oh wow, this really is a whole new wave, especially for women, because 50th year of Title IX.
Right.
And this largely applies to the US, but it's kind of an international reality as well.
Right. And then in
um
addition, not only are we the first sort of post Title IX, but there was like this weird, and we've talked about this before, like the weird myths about women in sport, like, it was going to hurt us or it was unfeminine. And so not only were there no opportunities, but it was actually frowned upon
right,
to
in many
be
ways.
athletic in many ways.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, from many angles.
right.
So yeah, so that's what's on my mind. What about you,
Cool.
Elizabeth? What's going on your side?
Well, what's on my mind is this beautiful new poster I have, and it is of Lynn Hill. And I just want to talk a little bit about who she is, because
Yeah.
she is just a phenomenal athlete, a phenomenal climber. And, she has done so much work to support women in the sport and, encourage more women to climb. And so, for people who don't know, she was, primarily active in the 80s and 90s and won all sorts of competitions. She was also, and I want to read this so I get it right, but she was the first one to do a free ascent of the nose in El Capitan in the Yosemite Valley. And that happened in 1993. And that took her, I think it took her a long time, that first free ascent. But then she went back the following year and did it in under 24 hours, another free ascent. And it's just incredible. And, since then, I think there's only been 3 or 4 other women who've done it. So, she is really exceptional. And again, she was the first one, not the first woman. She did also a lot of first
Right.
female ascents, but this was the first total. And I would just want to read a quote, because it was really interesting that she said this, because it's such a thing that I talk about a lot. Um, let's see if I can find. Oh, I think it's really important for women and girls to have role models to know that it's possible, because it's the mind and belief that drives us. And I just love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's your interest in these posters has gotten me interested in these posters. And one of the things, as I see you every week now, and there's this great poster behind you, it really is so uplifting. And it's so exciting. And like, I remember Lynn Hill from back in the time when she was doing all of her great achievements, when these things were happening, and just like bringing back those memories and remembering, just she's incredible. And I don't know, it's just so uplifting to see these great photos
Yeah,
behind you every week. And
I agree.
I've actually been looking for my own posters,
Oh, good.
Elizabeth.
And just since both you and I are short, I just want to point out that she's 5'2".
Ah, that's how tall I am.
I know, and I love hearing about short athletes because for me, being short is my bugaboo. Like I always thought that women athletes were tall, and so I just love when I find these exceptional short female athletes. So,
Ah, fantastic.
yeah. Well, we're going to move on, and the episode that we're very briefly going to touch on is with Tony Breidlinger and from Hear Her Sports, and that's episode 111. And Tony is I'm not really into car racing, so I want to make sure I get this right, but she is a professional stock car racing driver,
Great.
and she
Yeah.
competes for Venturini Motorsports, and she too is exceptional. She is, like one of the winningest females in motorsports, and she has high aspirations. And one of the things I really liked about talking to her was, she was tired of hearing about being the first woman this or that. She just wanted to drive her car, and she's been doing it since she was like teeny tiny and has
Yeah.
always, always, always loved driving. So that was really fun. But one of the things I wanted to talk about and sort of point out is she's very involved in social media, and we're going to be talking about NIL again a little bit later, but I really love her Instagram. And she also has a really active YouTube. And the reason I love it is, yes, she's incredibly beautiful and has sponsors that are in cosmetics and fashion and all this. And she, certainly isn't hiding that aspect of her personality. And we talked about that. She wants to bring it to the forefront because it's really important to her. But she is also really pointing out how great a driver she is and
Yeah.
how important driving is. And, in her YouTube, she has all these like really fun videos about driving with her in the car and showing, how they're getting ready and showing the people that help. And I just love her combination. And I was a little bit worried before I interviewed her about, like, do I really want to interview somebody who has all this fashion stuff? And so I asked my teenage cousin's daughter, and she's an athlete and really cool. And she is very much into equity and, like she's super smart. And she loved it. She loved seeing the combo, and it meant a lot to her to see somebody who could talk about both. I think was the main thing, that you're
Yeah.
not pigeonholed in to be, like if you're an athlete, you can't do anything else or, whatever. So I thought it
Or
was
you can't
great.
be into fashion and
Right.
be a serious athlete. And I'll tell you, one of my big takeaways with her is that she talks about her sport so well. Like you ask her some, very specific questions. She gets into a lot of detail, and she comes across as she's so mature, she's so grounded, and she just has these different likes. And, she really loves fashion, but she also really loves motorsports. And she seems to just mesh those together really well. And it just seems very authentic to me. And I think that's one thing that struck me is it didn't feel like to me she was trying to sell herself in the fashion world. It's just like, no, that's something she really loves, and it's super genuine. And yeah, I really liked how that came across. And the other part that you kind of touched on too that I really enjoyed about her is that she brought up the fact that she talks about being a woman driver because everybody else does. She's like, I just want to be a driver. I don't want people to treat me differently because I'm a woman, but they keep bringing it up. So I'm going to bring it up. And she just, I think grounded is the word that I keep coming back to with her. Is she just seems so stable and grounded, and she's so good at what she does.
I know. She's
She
also
doesn't.
super cool. Isn't she
Yeah,
cool?
I know. I know. It's a great interview, and she yeah, I think she stands as a very great example of somebody who I just feel like is doing it well.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, that's a
Yeah.
great segue to what we're going to talk about today in our media section. And again, I'm going to read it so I don't screw it up. But so we watched a video, and it was put out on YouTube by College Sports, hosted by Steph Garcia Chicos. I'm probably messing up that, so I apologize. And she was talking to Washington State Murrow College scholarly assistant professor Kara Hawkins Judlica. And Kara's specialty is the digital strategy with an emphasis in social media and online communities. And it was really great. And
Yeah.
I mostly loved that she said that, this is the Wild West. And I think watching this video was the first time that I really started to appreciate what a Wild West situation this is. So even just that was really great about this video. But I think what I'm interested and curious about mostly after listening to this, I mean, many things, but one of the things is like, how are the smaller sports going to be able to take advantage of NIL?
Right. Yeah. Um yeah, I had so many thoughts going into this because one of the things very that she points out really well is the fact that these big schools are going to use their big marketing abilities to make package deals and to capitalize for their athletes on making money for them,
Yeah, yeah,
and how it isn't a level playing field at all, and even more so than I had expected. It's
me
like,
too.
oh, there are ways for these big schools, and one of the things that she points out is that they can just tap into their donor bases and the alumni, and so it's just
Wow. Yeah,
the same thing that always happens in capitalism, you know, and the
yeah,
power structure really isn't any different. Like, yeah, you're giving some athletes, you know, with social media, it does a little bit level the playing field, but not really. And then, like, if a school can offer classes on how to market yourself or, you know, how to make these deals, or if you have faculty that helps put these deals together for athletes, and
right.
yeah, it just starts to get pretty ugly pretty quick. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think that's yeah. I mean, the stuff that we read this week was I was feeling very optimistic and excited last week. I think we were both feeling that way, and I, feel a lot less that way because we looked into the racial difference between who's getting the
Yeah.
money and who's not, and big sports and small sports, and Kara's talking about big schools and small schools, and this is another topic, but like the women are good at promoting themselves, but it wasn't clear to me that their audience is made up of women.
No.
And and it's also not clear to me, as Kara was saying, they're using what she called, the influencer model.
Yeah.
And as she pointed out, that's the only example that they know.
Right.
And so that made me a little bit depressed, which is why I wanted to talk about Tony, because I think she does such an amazing job. And in some of the articles we read, there were people who were doing really less than amazing jobs, and it seemed very like very sexualized, and
Yes.
a lot of booty shots, and it just, for me as a audience, like, I'm not going to follow that. So
Right. Yeah, and so some things that seem to be clarifying a bit is that sort of the influencer model can tend to be more of these sexualized, less clothing, etc. And those the followers to those accounts, it looks like, tend to be male.
right,
And then women who aren't doing that, they have more, you know, women who are doing more lifestyle stuff that doesn't have so much to do with what you're wearing or not. They tend to have more women. So it really depends on who you're marketing to. And some of these brands, you know, they really want that sort of younger male audience,
right,
and and it seems to correlate. I didn't do deep research into this, but from reading the articles that we've read, and we'll post all of these in the show notes, it looks very much like the subject, the that's getting all these endorsements, is a blonde-haired white
right,
female
right,
athlete,
right,
right?
right.
And yeah, and so we're seeing a lot of the same old prejudices and just sort of the same trends happening in this as happen in many, many places. And that's being noticed. At least it is being noticed front and center. So that's nice to see, but it doesn't change the fact that it's happening.
Right. And it also brings up a question that basically, got me to start Hear Her Sports. It's like, how do women know how to follow female sports? Do they know how to follow women athletes? And what do they want? And my scientific study of me, I mean, this is not what I want to follow.
No.
And and I think you and I are going to do a an episode, particularly on Cheryl Cookie's vending machine. But I will bring it up again. Is that I am not being offered the thing that I want to see in the vending machine, so
Right.
I'm going to pick
Yeah.
the best option. Um,
Right, right. And we're waiting for those more options to be in the vending machine because we haven't seen them yet.
right.
Um yeah, so I think that there's a lot of room to grow. But then there's also just this mad rush to the gold. Like there's the Wild West analogy, but I'd also like to throw out the gold rush analogy because it's sort of like
Yes.
here's the bright shiny object and you can go grab it. And people are just grabbing it any way they can. And one of the ways that people can grab that is by following this influencer model, and it does work, but what does that really mean? I don't know. It really gets me thinking about like myself as a college athlete, and I'm so happy I didn't have to think about this. I mean, I was a bike racer, so I
Yeah.
don't know that anybody would have been following me anyway, but to have to do to have to act like your own agent and a
Oh yeah.
model and posing with whey protein, I just like I wouldn't have wanted to do any of that.
Right.
I don't,
Right.
I wouldn't want to do it today. I wouldn't have wanted to do it then.
Well, not to mention Tony again, but like she seems to do it so well. And in the episode, we
Right.
sort of talk about how she manages that. And so, like that's super interesting. And there was another athlete that I thought did a really good job. It was Mosey Russell. She was the
Yeah.
Kentucky sprinter and hurdler, and her TikTok is amazing. I really loved it, and it's super fun. And she has a lot of dancing. She also has a lot of herself on the track. I mean, very speedy track, and her doing workouts and stuff. And so it seems super fun, and it also seems genuine, and that makes it easier if it's if you just happen to have
Right.
we all have cameras all the time, so she's not pretending, and so maybe it's
Right.
easier and more doable.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And her I will say just my own personal feeling is her social media feels very authentic to me.
Yes, I agree.
Some of these other ones don't feel authentic. They feel very posed and they feel very specific to a model that they seem to be following, and I it's hard to tell whether or not it's like, "Is that you, or are you just following this cookie cutter model that you're trying to copy?"
I wondered a
That's
lot.
my question.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it was the gymnast. I sort of wondered that I watched that. I sort of wondered, like, who's your photographer? Is that a guy that's doing the photography? Because
Right.
it was definitely sort of that viewpoint to me, like where another viewpoint could easily have been done and would have been less sort of ugly. That
Right.
was not what,
Provocative.
right. That was not what was selected. A more
Right.
provocative viewpoint was
Right.
selected.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and we talked about this many weeks back when we talked about the film This Changes Everything
yeah.
and how camera angles change when you put a woman behind the camera. So that's a really interesting thought. And I think you're talking about Livy Dunn, who
Yes, I am.
yeah, who she's one of the big earners right now. So, and
And she's white and blonde.
she's white and blonde, she's very very pretty. And power to everybody. Just when we're looking at the broader scope of sort of who's getting the most attention, it does concern me. It really
Yeah.
does. And I see athletes who, in my mind, really deserve to be on these lists, and I don't see them. Like Destiny Henderson, one of the star basketball players, and it's like to me she's like magic to watch on the court, and I didn't see her name pop up at all.
Right.
And she's a star player, she's fantastic, but and I also like I have to say, like, I'm not going to probably buy product because some athlete is posing with it. What I find more interesting is having companies that are genuinely pairing up with women athletes because they want to support them in an authentic way to be great athletes, not because they're pretty or they're shapely or they're willing to wear a bikini in their
Right.
Instagram feed. Like,
Right.
obviously you and I are not interested in those things. So yeah,
And
yeah,
I do like your point that you quickly made about, like, no objection to these women making money. It's just that they're the only, I mean, essentially they're the only ones who are making the huge money are these blonde, blue-eyed people. And so I think I think that's our point, is that, like, why isn't it spread more equally than it is?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so not blaming the subject, but blaming the machine behind
Right,
it,
right,
because it's just the same thing getting churned out.
right.
And hopefully we can change that a little bit. But I think unless, like, I don't know what it's going to take to turn this around other than people who are in it making some different choices and
Well,
people who are making the deals making different choices.
Well, I will also say that I think viewers have far more power than we give
Yes.
ourselves. And so,
Yes.
you said you wouldn't buy, but, maybe we need to start buying from sponsors who are supporting athletes in the way that we want them to be supported, or support companies that are supporting sort of movements, or, like other organizations, and, watching games and whatnot of
Right.
women that we want to see. I mean, there are ways financially we can show our support. And now that a lot of this stuff is being tracked, it's even that much more important.
Yeah, and something I often think about too is that we focus a lot on what women do and the influence that women can have, but we need men in this too.
Yeah.
And it would be helpful, I think, to have men who were a little more willing to not say like, "Oh, let's have a bunch of pinup posters and let's start uh, you know, admiring these women for what they do instead of always how they look," because that's what it appears to me is still happening. And I know
Good
that's a
luck with
lot to
that.
ask, I know, in my idealistic world, but we need them too. And we need, and there are
Yes.
a lot of great men who are standing up for women in very helpful ways, I think. But it's I do get it personally very touchy about the whole sexualization of female athletes as a
Right.
sales tool. I
I,
just
I agree.
I have a hard time with it.
I wonder why.
So yeah, exactly. So, you
Yeah.
know, yeah,
Well, we'll wrap up with that.
great.
And this has been Cherie and Elizabeth Talk Sports. I'm Elizabeth with Hear Her Sports Podcast, and I'm here with Cherie Turner from Strides Forward Podcast. And we'll see you next week. Bye
Thanks
bye.
so much. Bye-bye.